Welcome to part 2 of Thursday's Daily Delivery Podcast. I am Michael Rand. Hope you guys are having a great day out there still. This is all going to be all about the Timberwolves right now. Chris Hine joining me in just a second here to talk all about Friday's Game 3, to talk about what has happened in these playoffs so far for the Wolves. So hope you enjoy that. More Wolves talk coming up on tomorrow's show as well. I'll run through the 5 narratives we got terribly wrong about these Wolves over the last couple of years. Maybe talk a little prediction. Plus, I have Marcus Fuller on tomorrow to talk Gophers basketball, name, image, and likeness, all that good stuff. So that's coming up on tomorrow's show. But right now, please enjoy my discussion with Chris Hine, Star Tribune Timberwolves beat writer. Let's talk Timberwolves with Chris Hine, covering easily the hottest team in the Twin Cities, probably the hottest team in the NBA right now, although maybe Oklahoma City has some claim to that as well. They haven't looked too shabby in their playoff run so far either. But Chris, the Wolves 6-0, swept the Suns, up 2-0 on Denver with both of those wins on the road, including that 26-point rout in Game 2. What do you make of what you're seeing right now?
It's a little hard to comprehend just how dominant I thought game 2 was, especially when you consider Rudy Gobert wasn't there. I think everybody, whether you were a Wolves fan, a Nuggets fan, an NBA fan, it was just on another level of stunt, surprise, shock, awe, whatever kind of words you want to use. But I think it was just that kind of a performance was, I think, just a testament to what the Wolves have been trying to build here in the last few years, whether it begins with Chris Finch or bringing in Rudy Gobert or having Tim Connolly here, like kind of this, you talk a lot about trying to build habits and build a winning culture and a winning mindset among a team. And that, to me, a playoff game on the road against the defending champions without the defensive player of the year, and you still win by 26, like that to me is like the epitome of all those buzzwords you always hear teams talk about. Like the Wolves showed that they have that. And, it's been elusive for years and years and years for this franchise. And, they have it right now. And you said they're the hottest team in the league. I would agree with that. 6-0 in the playoffs with 4 of those coming on the road. Yeah. I think everything that has had to go right for this to happen has gone right. Whether it be the defense, whether it be just, health of the team, knock on wood, right? Carl playing the way he is, Naz Reid, stepping up and developing the way he has, having a piece like Nickeil Alexander-Walker come in and just play lights out in his role. Jaden McDaniels got a little foul trouble in the second half the other night, but I mean, when he was out there in the first half, man, his defense was incredible. So, and not even to mention Anthony Edwards,
right? Of course,
and what he's done so far in these playoffs. Everything is just coming together for this team at the absolute right moment. Everybody's hitting their peak, operating at the peak of their powers. Except maybe Chris Finch, who's has his leg in a brace, but mentally, that's what they need him for. I always, as a beat writer, you always want to have perspective, right? And you never want to overreact to what you're seeing, whether it's good or bad, right? And you always have to try to keep proper perspective in mind. So, going into Game 3 Friday night, defending champions, Nikola Jokic, at the time people hear this, probably be named MVP for the 3rd time. You always want to say that, like, okay, they have a chance to make some adjustments. But, man, I couldn't help but think how similarly Game 2 of the Denver series played out versus Game 2 of the Phoenix series.
Right.
The opposing coach storming onto the court to go confront an official, right? whoever Jaden McDaniels was guarding in that game, whether it was Devin Booker or Jamal Murray, seemed to have short-circuited in their brain. Devin Booker, I think that was the night he pushed. Remember,
Yes.
he got into a little shoving match with McDaniels, right? And Jamal Murray throws something onto the court in the first half of the game.
Twice.
Right,
A towel and a heat pad,
right.
yeah.
So it's like it played out so similarly from just an emotional standpoint, where like the opposing coach kind of lost his mind for a second. Jaden McDaniels' defensive assignment also seemed to not be able to handle it mentally. And the Wolves end up with a convincing victory that makes you think, man, they're not just winning these games, they are taking the life out of their opponents. And I think that's what is so remarkable. Game one was a close game.
Yes.
And you come back in game two thinking, all right, Denver's going to make some adjustments, and this will be potentially a 1-1 series, but they just took the life out of them in game two. And you just wonder, can you bounce back from something like that? Or is that just indicative of how the rest of this series is going to go?
I think that's the big question going into game three. And that's the one. I mean, if Denver is obviously going to have any life, they've got to bring something in game three. And you don't count out a team with, Jokic on it, a team that won the championship last year and has had deeper playoff runs even before that. To me, the storyline of the series with Denver is Murray and how he's not healthy fully. And if he's not healthy fully and getting hounded on every possession by McDaniels or Edwards sometimes, or all three of them sometimes, like he's had no space to operate. If he's not only frustrated but not healthy, like Denver is not Denver without Jamal Murray. And if he can't pull something together in game three and have a better outcome, they're going to struggle because they need him. They obviously everything pivots through Jokic, but if you don't have Murray, you can't get it going. And I'm sure the energy Friday is going to be buzzing in Target Center, and it does feel to me like you're right. If that's going to be the case, then the Wolves have a great chance. Now, the Gobert stuff was interesting in game two. Like, he missed the game. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, like, is this the pivot point of the playoffs, right? Like, him missing a game gives Denver a chance to get momentum, get a win, things like that, change how they feel about the complexion of the series. And obviously, everybody had Gobert's back. He absolutely did the right thing, but it had the potential to be that. And instead, it becomes this rout without him. What were you thinking going into game two after it was announced that he would not be playing?
I kept thinking back to the game that they played the third time. I think it was the third time they played Denver. Excuse me. It was a game at home here. And it was on a back-to-back. They had I believe the night before was Ant's big dunk against John Collins in Utah. I think that was the previous night. So they get on a plane, they come back to Minnesota the next night, have to play Denver, who was rested. Denver was not on a back-to-back for this game. And Rudy Gobert was out, Karl was out, and Naz Reid was even out because of a head injury. And the Wolves almost won that game.
Right, I remember that.
That's what I kept thinking about going into that game. I'm like, man, I saw that game, and they pushed Denver to the limit with Luka Garza playing major minutes trying to guard Nikola Jokic. And I'm like, I think this is. I didn't, as a beat writer, you don't really like put out predictions or anything on there. I say, in my head, I'm thinking, okay, no Gobert, they're probably going to lose. Denver, is going to exploit that. But in the back of my mind, I'm also thinking, like, I've seen this team with its kind of back against the wall in a situation where it could have just kind of rolled over on that night in Minnesota, and they didn't, and they almost won the game as a result of it, even with a severely shorthanded lineup against a full-strength Denver team. So I was thinking, man, if they could just make it a game like that, maybe they get in Denver's head a little bit where it's like, oh, wow, these guys aren't just going to let us have game two because Rudy's not here. And it obviously turned into much more than that. You bring up the point about that being a potential pivot point in the series. I mean, in some ways, it was a pivot point maybe in the other direction.
Yes.
Where it's like this was a defining moment of this series and maybe of this whole playoffs for this team when they don't have Rudy Gobert and they still hold the defending champions to 80 points. In a weird way, maybe it accomplished the opposite and just galvanized this team maybe even more than it already was coming into game two. So, I never thought they didn't have a chance. And I think that's what's different about this team, compared to last year and previous teams is, Chris Finch has tried to instill the culture of, okay, so we don't have a guy here, but that's not an excuse for us to lose a game.
Right.
We have to find a way. Everybody has to do maybe a little more. Guys are going to have to play some more minutes. But there's still enough on this team to win a game. And that's part of it too, is like, you weren't staring down a potential long stretch where that Rudy Gobert was going to be one game that he wasn't here. So if you could just find a way to get one game, I'll tweak the game plan for one night and figure it out. And they were able to do it in amazing fashion.
Gobert wins his 4th Defensive Player of the Year award on Tuesday. You guys talked to him Wednesday. The narrative around him couldn't be any different than it was last year, right? He came here in that, the big blockbuster trade in the offseason before the 22-23 season. Doesn't go the way they want. It doesn't get a single vote in the, the all defensive award ratings a year ago, then wins his 4th Defensive Player of the Year award, changes. There's a big part of changing the defensive culture here. What did he have to say? I mean, he's a lot of has to be swirling around for him right now. He's just became a dad for the first time. Like where's his head at in terms of just, winning this award, but also just everything that's going on for him right now?
I think he felt very prideful watching the game the other night. He mentioned how he was holding his new son watching the game, and just with a big smile on his face as he was seeing how the team was defending and playing. And he kind of said, I asked him today, like, when did you kind of know that this team could maybe have a really special defense? And he mentioned that Boston game at home back in November. They're guarding Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, and they're not giving them an inch. And that was the moment where Rudy said, "Okay, maybe we really do have something special here." And Rudy's a very motivated guy. He will listen and hear and absorb, and he has throughout his career a lot of the negative chatter about him, and he uses it as motivation and fuel. So I think in a lot of ways, he didn't say this today, but I do think in a lot of ways this season, and if the Wolves can continue this run here, it will be a lot of vindication for where he's at in his career and just what he brings to the table. Because for 3+ years, he's fought the narrative of Rudy gets played off the floor in the playoffs,
right? And
the Wolves made the bet that that's not a true narrative. And I think with each playoff win and blowout, you're seeing that more and more shift to, oh, well, maybe that was wrong.
Yeah.
And, maybe it does matter what kind of defense he has around him, just like with any team.
Sure.
There's no team that is going to be a good playoff team if just one or two guys are good defensively and the other three are miserable, or banged up or what have you. So I think this has been a huge, I think it can be a very vindicating season for Rudy Gobert in a lot of ways.
National narrative is interesting on this team right now. A lot of people on the Wolves bandwagon, maybe they were there a little bit before, but there was definitely doubt coming in here, after they were 0-3 against Phoenix, and then, obviously turning that around with the sweep. You had Charles Barkley the other night saying the series is over, Wolves in 4. What do you think about the national narrative? What do you think about some of the people who are already saying this Denver series is over?
It's just amazing how this stuff flips on its head, right?
Yes.
Like just observing it from a local perspective or just from afar. It's just what one game, one performance, can do. It's, you go from, can the Wolves, win a playoff series against Phoenix to, I was listening to Bill Simmons' podcast, to Bill Simmons is trying to place them in the the ranking of all-time defensive teams, and
Yeah.
when you were not even picking them to win against Phoenix. It's like it's crazy just how quickly the national narrative can flip and the way the talking heads can talk about a team. Um, you know, I thought the reaction on social media was really fun to see, like people really
Yes.
reacting to the way the Wolves play defense. I think that was unlike anything I've really ever seen. Like they've made defense somehow exciting and
Yeah.
fun to watch, which is usually not the case at all.
No,
Usually,
right.
defense is a slog, and a good defensive team doesn't usually make for good aesthetic basketball. But I think the effort just pops off the screen, with these guys, and they finally, we've watched it all year. They've had the number one defense in the league for the entire season, but now that the lights are shining brightest in the playoffs, you're finally getting some of these national talking heads to pay attention and sit up and notice. That's what happens when your team is only on national TV a handful of times during the season.
Couple more things for you, Chris. One, I don't know if this is overthinking it or not, but I wonder how much the Wolves are benefiting right now from the amount of rest they've been able to have in some of these cases. Not having to play in the play-in round and getting that kind of, almost week to prepare for Phoenix, sweeping Phoenix, so then you have a little bit of extra time before you have to play Denver. You get these 3 days off now between, just the way the playoffs are spread out. A team that expends so much energy on defense, a team that, yeah, has got some young guys, but also got some vets like Conley, guys like Gobert, who got an extra day of rest, obviously with, well, I don't know if it's rest really, but didn't have to play at least.
Physical
As
rest, I
as
guess.
as
Yeah,
someone who's
like
been a new
yeah.
dad a few times, I know you don't get a lot of rest in that case, but just in terms of the wear and tear on their bodies, it felt like the last, 30, 40 games of the season, they had a lot of back-to-backs. They had a lot of weird travel. Like maybe that was playing a little into how they weren't necessarily sharp every night. How much you just think the simple fact of they don't have to play as much right now is helping them?
I actually think it's one of the more. I wrote about it in round one. It's one of the more underrated things about the playoff schedule. I think there's a couple things at play here that are really helping the Wolves play at this level. And one is the rest. Because early in the season, and Chris Finch alluded to this in the Phoenix series, he said that they were playing defense at a level that he hadn't seen since November, right? And when you look back at what November was for them, they had like a huge run of home games,
Yep.
right? And almost no back to backs. So they were able to stay in one place, get rest and recovery. And Denver came in here at that time. Boston came in here at that time. I want to say maybe Oklahoma City also came in around that time. And they won all those games with very strong defensive performances. And I think that's what you're seeing now is you don't have the wear and tear. And they did themselves a favor by sweeping Phoenix. They could do themselves a favor if they somehow end this series by Sunday, right? And when you do travel, at the beginning of a series, you get to stay in one place, even when you do have to travel.
That's
You're
true.
there for 4 nights, 5 nights in a row. You can settle in, you can get your rest and recovery. You're not moving from city to city. So especially early in a series, you can really have your legs under you. Now it'll be interesting to see if Denver manages to make this a series because the games will be coming every other night, a little more travel. Elevation comes into play as well. If we go to game 5 and then we come back to game 6, all that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens if we do get a deeper series. But I think that's been huge for them right now. The ability to rest their bodies with the amount of effort that they expend. I think the other thing that's played a big part in this is the NBA allowing more physicality in the second half of the season. Basically saying, "Hey, we need to let a little more defense back into the game."
Yep.
That has benefited the Wolves a ton. I feel like because I don't think any team has really benefited more from that. I mean, I was thinking about it the other day, the other night, like McDaniels, really didn't get into foul trouble at any point in the playoffs, aside from the second half of that game the other night, and
Right.
that was always been a problem of his. for his whole career, basically. But under these new rules, he's able to get away with a little more. I think it's been huge for them and for him specifically to be able to have a little more leeway in terms of fouls. And I guess, you could maybe even throw Carl into that mix, even though Carl has had his share of foul trouble so far in the playoffs. But the rest, the schedule, and the amount of physicality that the NBA is allowing in the playoffs has really benefited this team overall.
Royal Credit Union's Smart Checking accounts offer no monthly fees and no minimum balance. Enjoy financial freedom when you open your Royal Credit Union Smart Checking account online at rcu.org/go-checking. Insured by NCUA.
Final thing, I think it's remarkable that the injury to Chris Finch has been not rendered a non-story, but the fact that they've been able to have this kind of new reality be so smooth with Finch still, propped up on, back in the bench area with Mike and Nori up on the sidelines. Like it does feel like they have been able to make that as seamless as possible.
It seems like it. Finch joked the other day that he and Mike and Nori share a brain.
Yes.
Not the kind of brain you want to share with somebody. It's been fun to see their, when Micah does the media availabilities and when Finch does it, there's always a shot taken at the other.
Right.
When they do it, it's always, it's been kind of entertaining to see them go back and forth like that. But I think in terms of just their communication, and it's seamless. It's been seamless. The players have said it's seamless. There's really no difference. I think Micah has a decent amount of leeway to do things as he sees. I remember in game one, and this staff knows the Denver staff as well as anybody because Micah and Finch both worked under Michael Malone. But I thought it was interesting in game one. I noticed Michael Malone was yelling something at his team at the end of the floor in front of the Wolves bench. And I saw Micah go over and he was like listening intently at like what Malone was saying. And then Micah made his call based off of what Malone had just said.
Yeah.
He didn't have to consult with Finch on it, but he just kind of yelled something out based off of what Malone had just said. You can see like Micah kind of leaning in with his head, like doing the ear thing, like you're really trying to intently listen to somebody, and then he just turns around and makes a call on his own. So I think they just know the preparation and they know their opponents so well that maybe he doesn't even have to turn around to Finch and say, hey, we're going to do this in some instances. But you look over there and Finch is very much involved and communicating, yelling, waving his hands, making signals, all this stuff. I remember there was also a moment I think late in game one where Ant looked over and Finch was looking at Finch, and Finch was the one making the call. It wasn't Micah at that moment in time, and Finch was making a hand signal for a call to Ant. So it's very much Finch is very much still involved with what's going on.
Do you think we'll see Denver's best game on Friday, or do you feel like they're rattled enough that they're going to have a hard time finding that game?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I mean, it's easy to say yes, that it's the defending champions, and yes, you're going to get their best effort. The Wolves might have just, again, kind of taken their soul in game two. There's also, I feel like that could happen as well. I think for Denver to get back in this series, and it's not the preferred way Nikola Jokic wants to play, but I really do think Nikola Jokic has to go for like 50 on Friday night.
Yeah.
Like, he has to become almost an unstoppable scorer. If the Wolves are not going to double team him, which is how they're going to defend him, because they want to shut down everybody else.
Yep.
He has to take advantage of that as much as he can and try to score and try to just go for 50. Start shooting a lot of threes. Start taking Carl, try to get him in foul trouble. Start taking Nas, try to get him in, whatever, right? Like trying to get to the line, trying to generate efficient points, because right now just none of it is working. He tries to get his teammates involved, but the Wolves know that, and they have the personnel to shut down his teammates.
Right.
They got a good Aaron Gordon game offensively the other night, and it still wasn't enough.
Not even
because
close.
they shut down Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr.
Yep.
So that's honestly the only route I see right now for Denver.
Well, we'll see if they can get there. We'll see what happens, and we'll see how far this team can go. I mean, hey, if they finish this off at some point against Denver, Oklahoma City looked awfully good against Dallas in game one. Not saying that's going to be the opponent, but Oklahoma City definitely looked like the better team in game one. Getting ahead of ourselves, but that could be a great series too if they got that far. Oklahoma City is very young, but they play great defense too. They've got Holmgren, Dort, SGA. They've got some guys that get it done on both ends of the court. I mean, I don't want to look too far ahead, but that would be an interesting clash of styles and a possibility of. Man, Chris, we're talking about a team that I feel like right now with the Wolves could go to the finals. I don't think there's any reason to think they can't. Not saying they will, but there's no reason to think they can't at this point.
No, there's still a lot of work for them to do, but they have just as good a shot as anybody, and they've proven that right now. This is an era of the NBA where it is open. It is a wide open NBA, and so the Wolves have to have an attitude of why not us?
Yeah,
and I think they do right now.
Yep,
and they're 10 wins away.
10 wins away. Yeah,
10 wins away. Why not? Why not the Wolves? If it can be the Thunder, if it can be Boston, if it can be these teams that haven't won in a while, why not? Why can't it be the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Yep. Interesting times, fun times for fans, interesting times for everybody. Chris Hine, appreciate it as always. I'm sure we'll talk very soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mike.